Hello, I'm Alan Newberry and I'd like to say thanks for watching my videos. I thought it might be fun to put out a quick video on the player's perspective on going on Forged in Fire. It's a crazy experience that most people will never have the opportunity to do, and I did. And I even came out with a win against all odds, which is kind of crazy. Anyway, let me go ahead and run through the process. The first thing that you do is the first challenge. Challenge number one, you're forging a blade. You don't know what they're going to throw at you. It could be random car parts, canister welds, Japanese forging techniques, who knows what they're going to do. But you go in there and you're bringing the skills you've got and you're trying to make it work. But in my case, it was forging with a suit of armor, and in our case, it was kind of difficult to get the welds to stick. In my case, I had one bad weld, and I had to work through it. I ended up using, a good chunk of time there at the end, trying to get rid of the welding flaw, and even went into the second round and used a lot of time getting rid of it completely because I didn't want to have that show up to bite me in the rear end whenever the judging came around. And I managed to barely get through and squeak through the time. It's crazy to know what you need to spend your time on, but in my case, I knew a welding flaw would probably send me home, so I made sure I got rid of that. In my case, I had a 5-layered billet. The middle and the outer layers were hardenable steel. Since the welding flaw was on one side, I ground through that side to get rid of that, which meant that the middle was no longer a hardenable piece of steel, so I had to do an asymmetric grind so that it would be able to be a hardenable piece of steel there. So it was all ground from one side, but it actually kind of looked cool with the contrasting metals. And the third task is another crazy one. You've got some sort of weapon, in my case a spear, and you've got the things that you've got in your shop, your equipment, your skills, and you've got the supplies that you've got in the shop, and they may not be the things that you wish that you had for this particular task, but it's your task and you've got what you've got, so you've got to work with it. And in my case, I'm building a spear, and it goes along pretty good for the first about day and a half. I've got a pole mostly formed. I have made a spear, got a nice socket going, have a nice looking blade shape. It's falling within the parameters, I think. And then it comes towards the end of that second day, and I remember, hey, there's a weight requirement on here. And I had it in the back of my mind, and it didn't seem like it was that heavy until I put that blade onto the scale and said, oh, that doesn't look good. Then I put the still somewhat unfinished pole onto the scale again, and I'm like over a pound shy. So here I am 2 days in, and I've got a spear that is looking pretty good. I was feeling nice about everything, and suddenly things changed. And so what I thought is, I have 2 days down, I've got 2 more days going, I'm going to start working on another spear. But before I did that, I went ahead and came up with a way to make that spear meet the minimum weight. So in that case, I made really huge lugs out of some really thick steel, which is not what my original plan was. My original plan was to make some really pretty, small, more decorative, and still quite functional wings to go on to the spear and to braze those on. However, whenever I had these giant lugs, I did not want to braze those on because I would have to do a lot of really tight fitment for brazing, and also the time limit. And what I was trying to do here is make a backup spear. So by the end of that second day, I had the spearhead with the big wings on it done, and it was now my backup spear. So I went to work with the biggest chunk of metal I could find, which was a brush hog blade, and made a second spear. Now this spear was a lot beefier because I wasn't using what was the biggest chunk of W2 that I had. Now I'm using a really big chunk of 5160 in the form of a brush hog blade, and this made for a lot thicker, heavier socket, a much beefier blade. I was trying to now maximize everything because I didn't realize how big of a roll that minimum weight was going to be. So anyway, I actually forged a second spear on the show. This is actually the spear that I thought I was going to be bringing to the challenge. This is just in a heat-treated state. It hasn't had the finished grinding or had the wings brazed onto it. But in this case, it was a much beefier spear. I would be able to put much better looking and thinner lugs on it. The wings would be a lot nicer. Anyway, I wasn't able to do that. Why? I had equipment issues. I ended up having my power hammer was just not having this brush hog blade. It was starting to throw dies. I have a quick change die system on there, and it was just loosening up left and right, stripped out the bolts holding it on, so I had to find ways to fix that. I had to deal with that several times, ate up a ton of time, and then I was getting it going, and finally I threw the major power hammer work, my forge dies. I have to scramble to figure out a way to get my forge going again. When I get my forge going again, it's not getting hot enough to forge weld, so I end up having to weld the socket using a welder, which is not my strong suit. In my case, I haven't ever really done a lot of welding. I've welded just, 3 or 4 different things. I use it to just tack weld billets together is about all I use it for. And so I was really inexperienced with welding. In this case, this show definitely taught me, hey, let's work on that welding skill. So actually I have enrolled in a welding class, so I'm currently going through that. So pretty soon I should have a little bit better welding chops, which is definitely something that I would recommend for anybody going on the show. Work on your flexibility. If you're not ready to put out a sword or an axe or crazy weird stuff, well, you better get ready because they're going to throw a curveball at you. Anyway, so I spent that time working on my second spear, and it came to the end of the day of the 4th day, and I had the second spear heat treated, but no lugs yet put on it. No wings were created yet, and I had 1 day left to finish the fitment of the pole and to finish the whole thing. And it just, the time frame was getting kind of close. So what I ended up doing was opting to go for the first spear, which was really my backup spear, and use it. Even though I didn't really like the way the welds looked, I had used that spear as a hammer. I took it and banged on logs with it, and those lugs I knew were going nowhere. It added a lot of nice weight to the end of the spear. It had a really cool hamon, and I knew that this spear would function really, really well. So in the end, I decided, let's go with the backup spear. So I spent that last day finishing it up, do the finish grinding on the spear and get a really nice fitment to the pole and finishing up the pole. And in the end, it was a very functional spear, but it wasn't the spear that I wanted or the one that I thought I was going to put out there, but it worked really well. Aesthetically, it wasn't what I wanted. It ended up with having a little bit of a bow at the end of the shaft. On the opposite end, I knew that little bit, it wasn't a giant bend, it was a little bit of a bend. I knew it was there, but my original plan was that it's not that big of a deal because to get the length that I need, I can just chop the end off. But because of the weight issues, I couldn't chop the end off because I needed the extra weight. And in handling the pole, it worked really well and felt well with that extra little bit of length, so I kept it on there. So that's kind of the crazy thing with the third challenge is that people don't see it. They don't see how it comes out, which I don't blame them for. If you take 5 days worth of footage and you cram it into 3 minutes, you're going to have to follow the main storyline. You can't go off onto, hey, let's watch 3 minutes of this guy fixing a power hammer, or things like that, because then you're not going to see the actual weapon that comes through. I think they did a really good job in editing the show. I kind of wish you could have more of those parts in there, but I totally understand why they're not, because it's just not a lot of time. Anyway, that's kind of how that came out. In the end, my spear performed really, really well. It sliced through some really smelly old hogs. It smelled pretty bad in there. That was kind of the fun part. There were people with bandanas around their faces because the smell was so bad. So it was kind of a funny moment, I thought. But it was great. I'm glad they kept the kill test in there. Watching Doug Marcaida go, "It will kill," is crazy fun. It's as good as when you see it on TV. It's even better if it's your stuff. And I had a lot of fun with it. The guys that were there were great. I know they had to deal with their issues too. And I know Clayton, he had to deal with the weight issue as well. He chose different ways to deal with it than I did. And it came down, it was really close. I managed to get the win, but these guys were great. The people working there were great. I really loved hanging around all those TV guys. It was a lot of fun. So basically, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks a lot. I have way more appreciation for the guys who have gone on this show and had the guts to get out there and do it, because you really are leaving a lot of control into these other guys' hands. You don't know what they're going to throw at you or how well you're going to do with it, and you're not going to have a lot of time to try to learn new skills. I mean, this was the first spear I'd ever made, the first socket I had ever forged. I've now done a few more of them. I'm kind of getting the hang of this spear thing, and I'm kind of liking it. But yeah, you don't know what's gonna happen, so it takes some guts. And some people pull off some crazy stuff. I mean, some of the work that comes out, I can't believe that they did it in that time frame, and I'm very impressed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I've got a little bit of forging going on. I've got a video coming up on making a socket for a spear. So now that I've done it a few times, I'm kind of getting the hang of it, and I thought it might be nice if there are a few more videos out there, because boar spears are actually pretty cool, and I think more people should be making them. Who wants cake? Me!